Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Laurel. I am the new assistant manager at Green Apple Books on the Park, the store in which you are all sitting. Thank you for joining us tonight, whether in person or online, to celebrate this event with Molly Giles and Sylvia Brownrigg, celebrating Molly's latest book, Lifespan. Yeah! So we're broadcasting from San Francisco, which sits on unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land. We hope you consider donating either your time or money to an Indigenous organization every time you hear a land acknowledgement. We actually have a handy QR code at the back desk there. If you feel called to do that, that is where the signing will take place later on. And I'll just go over a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Please silence your cell phones if you haven't already. You are allowed to take pictures if you like. And the bathroom is behind us, behind this sign here. So it will be available after the event, not during the event for obvious reasons. And if you have any questions about how to get into there, just ask me or one of my colleagues. So books, the reason that we're all here, they're available for purchase in store or on our website. Buying books from us directly helps us out as a store, helps us to continue to put on events like this, and supports the authors who put their heart and souls into these books. So tonight we're going to hear a brief reading from Molly, then a conversation between Sylvia and Molly, and then we'll follow it up with audience questions and a signing line afterward. Sylvia Brownrigg is the author of several acclaimed works of fiction, including the novels Morality Tale, The Delivery Room, which is the winner of the Northern California Book Award, Pages for You, winner of the Lambda Award, The Metaphysical Touch, and a collection of stories, 10 Women Who Shook the World. Brownrigg's works have been included in the New York Times and Los Angeles Times lists of notable fictions and have been translated into several languages. Her novel for children, Kepler's Dream, written under the name Juliet Bell, was published in 2012 and turned into a feature film. Brownrigg lives with her family in London and in Berkeley, California. Molly Giles is an award-winning fiction writer. Her first collection of stories, Rough Translations, won the Flannery O'Connor Prize for Short Fiction, the Boston Globe Award, and the Bay Area Book Reviewers Award. 4 subsequent collections, Creek Walk, Bothered, All the Wrong Places, and Wife with Knife, have also won awards, including the Small Press Best Fiction Award, the California Commonwealth Silver Medal for Fiction, the Spokane Short Fiction Award, and the Leapfrog Press Global Fiction Prize. It's a lot of prizes. She published her first novel, Iron Shoes, in 2000, and 23 years later published its sequel, The Home for Unwed Husbands. Giles has taught fiction writing at numerous writing conferences and several universities, including San Francisco State. And her latest book, Lifespan, is the reason we're all here tonight. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Sylvia Brownrigg and Molly Giles.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction of both of us, and to Green Apple, and for all of you for coming out tonight. It's wonderful to be live together to celebrate Molly's fantastic book. There's so many great places to start. Molly's going to kick us off with a reading, but I just wanted to do my own little micro introduction of this flash memoir, which is a form that was new to me, and it's a fantastic way to tell a life story that spans from when Molly was 3 years old in 1945 till past her 80th birthday. Along the way, there are marriages and divorces, illnesses, upheavals, successes in her work and in her life, raising of 3 daughters. What's really fascinating and engaging about the book is that a lot of these dramatic events happen off stage, and the texture of the book itself are these sort of interstitial moments that don't always get canvassed with such care and attention in a book. And I'm very eager to speak with Molly more about that. It was such a pleasure to read. In preparing for tonight, I read some of the many wonderful reviews and comments on Molly's fiction and work, and one of my favorite phrases that was from Amy Tan was a comment on the strange wisdom on the human heart and its unerring sense for finding trouble. And I found in Lifespan that there are many troubles in this book and also many hidden, almost secret contentments. And I'm very much looking forward to our conversation. So please welcome again, Raleigh.
I'm terrible with the mic. Is this working? Good.
Yeah.
Sylvia, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. Laurel, that was a great introduction. And thank you for being here. So the book is divided into years, and as Sylvia said, it's flash fiction. So some of the pieces are, a page long. Some are 2 or 3. I think one is actually 4 pages long. It just killed me to write it. I want to shorten it. So I'm going to start, because Sylvia's book, which I just loved, it's a staggering mystery.
Staggering mystery.
Staggering mystery, which is up in front. And I just read it recently, and it's all about fathers. So I thought, well, I'll be talking to Sylvia, so maybe I'll start this talking about my very dysfunctional relationship with my beloved father. So starting in 1945, which is when I first met him, I was 3. I had probably met him as a baby, of course, but he was away in the war. We called it the war, World War II. He came back in 45, and I had been living here in San Francisco in an old Victorian with my mother, my grandmother, my aunt, my 2 sisters, my 2 cousins, and 2 maiden ladies who lived upstairs. And I was starved for men. There were no men in San Francisco at all. Anyhow, so in comes this stranger who starts, bossing everybody around. And I wasn't so sure I liked it. So this is 1945, and I was not behaving well. If I start to behave like a normal 3-year-old girl, my father will let me sit in the front seat of the moving van with him. But I will have to crawl out from under the kitchen table, wash my hands and face, and stop snarling. He did not come back from the war to be attacked by a wild tiger. He doesn't like having his ankles nipped. He doesn't like being growled at. He doesn't think it's funny. She's not used to you yet, my mother explains. She stands in the doorway holding my sister Bridget in her arms. The only men she knows are the milkman, the iceman, and that mounted policeman she tries to follow down the block every morning. Can do, my father asks, nudging me with the tip of his shoe. I nod. Look, Slippy, he says, I'm leaving in 5. I scrub the crayoned whiskers off my cheeks and scramble down the stairs after him. I do not need help getting into the van. I do not need help closing the door. Slam it again, my father says, and a minute later, slamming it himself, Jesus. When I kneel to look out the window, he pushes me down onto the seat. You don't get car sick, do you? I shake my head. Good-o. He lights a cigarette, starts the van, and turns the radio on to a baseball game. I am too shy to look at him, so I look out the window. Mommy is right. I am not used to him yet. Ever since he's come back from the war, things have been different. I can't sleep in Mommy's bed anymore. I have to sleep with my cousins and Bridget, and they are still in diapers. I can't talk at dinner or run up and down the hallway. I can't swim in the bathtub or hang off the banister. No one listens to my stories. No one looks at my art. She's spoiled, my father says. You let her run wild. Still, there is something about him. When my father walks to the apartment, I follow behind, trying to put my own feet where his have been. If he turns around, I stop. When he starts to walk again, I start too. I sneak into his closet and press his army jacket to my cheek, so warm and rough. When I'm alone in the bathroom, I stick a finger in his shaving cream, lick it, and spit it out before I get caught. I'll give you 3, he says, to stop kicking the glove box. I didn't know I was kicking the glove box. It's just that I have never sat this high up before. I have never seen so much of San Francisco. Apartment houses and trees and cars and jeeps crowded with soldiers sitting on their duffel bags and old women walking their dogs down the sidewalks. A bus passes and another little girl waves at me, but she is gone before I can wave back. Approaching the Golden Gate Bridge, I catch my breath. It is like entering a tall orange palace with no walls and no roof. Gulls swoop above us. Gray fog swirls around us, boats sail below. My father points to a car with people leaning out the windows taking photographs. Look at those idiots, he says, and in the same breath, I told you to sit down. No, you didn't. No, I didn't. He laughs without making any sound. Do you know, those are the first words you've actually spoken to me since I got back. I take a long, deep breath of his cigarette smoke. It tastes warm and burnt toasty, and I like it. I like the way his big hands look on the steering wheel, and I like the way he sings to himself beneath the chatter of the radio. I hear the baby's crib and mommy's typewriter and my rocking chair clink and jangle from the back of the van. They are going to our new house in Sausalito, where my father will start his new job, and my mother will start a new novel, and I will start preschool. I stretch my arms up higher and lean back to look up as one by one the bridge towers overhead hug us and let us go. And I guess, was I going to jump ahead? Can you remember? I think I was going to jump ahead to the whole book is structured around the Golden Gate Bridge. That was mentioned. Because every scene in it, I was trying to think, how could I, I've had a very boring life. I haven't done anything. Yes, you have children and you teach, and it's boring. I haven't never gone to Africa to shoot a lion and wouldn't. But I thought, well, I have driven back and forth over the Golden Gate Bridge, and so in every instance there, I just broke my life down into the times where something had happened on the bridge, or when the bridge meant something to me that had something to do with where I was at that time. So this one is much later, 1991, and I'm in my 40s, and my father is dying down in Carmel with his second wife, who doesn't like me. We've been estranged, my father and I. So this is 1991. He doesn't want to see me. I don't care. He's dying, and he's my dad, and I want to see him, and I'm going to the hospital anyway. It's ridiculous that he lets my stepmother keep us apart. She punishes me when you visit, he explained, his voice low. How? Does she beat him? Does she starve him? Is my dad truly so weak that he lets this crazy woman boss him around? Is he not the hero of my life? I don't know what to do. I write him a letter every morning and tear it up every afternoon. I say I am sorry we are estranged, and then I say he should be sorry, and then I say we deserve each other, but mainly I say, don't die. I will never say any of that today. I will sit by his hospital bed and simply give him the news. Gretchen, it's my oldest daughter, has left the old man at last. She is still waitressing, but she has started to write articles for a weekly newspaper. Her 2 little boys are fine. My daughter Rachel is back from her travels and doing graduate work at Berkeley. My daughter Devin is 12 and stole the show as Fagin in her school's production of Oliver. Richard is, well, no one knows how my ex-husband is, or even where he is. There have been sightings. There have been sightings of him talking to Iranian salesmen at various rug shops in Berkeley, but that's all. I will not mention the foreclosure I am fighting. I will not mention my boyfriend Ken. When I introduced them 2 years ago, Dad ignored Ken's outstretched hand. Heard a lot about you, Dad said. Haven't liked what I heard. And Ken, surprised into some genius instinct I didn't know he had, just laughed. I will not remind Dad of that. I will tell him how I won the National Book Critics Circle Award for book reviewing last month and was flown to New York and seated next to John Updike at the award ceremony. I will tell him how I managed to make John Updike laugh and how the hotel was overrun with flocks of merry red-haired children flown in from Ireland to march in the St. Patrick's Day parade. Dad likes hearing things like that. He does not want to hear how sad and sorry I am that he and I have failed at being friends. And why would we want to be friends anyway? Dad did what he had to do raising me. He fed me and clothed me. He took me to horseback riding lessons. He zipped my wedding dress up when I first married Dan, and although he said as he did it, too late, you don't have to go through this, you know. He still lent us his Porsche to use on the drive back from Reno. He paid for my 1 year at Berkeley, and after I married Dan, he continued to send checks. Made out to my maiden name, it's true, but checks we needed and probably never properly thanked him for. He was kind to Richard. He found my car keys when they were wedged under the car seat. He may never have said I love you, but he did say ditto when I said I loved him, and I always knew he would be there to help me out of trouble. If I'm lucky today, Dad will let me touch his hand, splotched and bruised, lying on top of the covers with an IV running into it. But I won't expect him to bless me. He won't have to. I already feel blessed right now, speeding toward him, just knowing that today at least, he is still alive. Thank you.
Thank you. That gives you a great sense, if you've not read the book yet, of just how these wonderful little episodes are. I think of them as snapshots, really. And so the first question, there's a lot of content that's in a kind of slim volume. There are lots of different stories and elements, but I would like to start with form because I'm so fascinated by this form. We both are primarily fiction writers, so in your short stories and your novels, you have obviously experimented and used all of the traditional, narrative techniques. So I'm really curious how you happened upon this form, which I think is brilliant.
I don't know, are any of you writers who write flash fiction? Oh, good.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, truly my favorite form. You could take a 40-page story and you can get it down to 4 paragraphs and not lose anything if you spend 40 years doing it. It's not easy to do, but I love brevity. I like editing, and I like weeding more than planting often. I think I like editing a little more than I like creating, which is a horrible thing to have to admit about yourself. I do like, I've used this in all my classes and in many of my talks. I love Ray Bradbury's, the fantasy writer's, advice on writing. He said, throw up, then clean up. And I truly believe in getting everything you want to say out on the page as fast as you can and before you think about it. And then go back and say, what's in here? What can I pull out, I mean, I don't want you to think of, vomit, where there's actually an emerald in the you pull out, but they are there. And if you don't get it out, you won't. I could never just sit down and write a short, word for word. They used to call them short shorts, I guess. Always reminds me of that awful song, Who Wears Short Shorts? But it's a form that I've been doing for maybe, 25 years, I guess. And to me, it's natural. And I tried to write poetry for years. Those of you who are poets know that you have to compress. You have to compress. You can't put every beautiful little thing in there. I really like writing them. I sometimes admit that I don't always understand the ones I read, other people's. If they're a little too terse, if they're a little too intelligent, frankly. Who am I thinking of? She's married to Paul Auster.
Oh, Lydia Davis.
Lydia Davis, I don't understand her. She's way above me. And she writes a lot of flash fiction, and I just don't get it. So mine, I like story. So mine usually just have to have a story in them at some point. So.
I mean, they're snapshot-like, but they do have they have a shape. They're I want to come back to form, but we have to talk about the bridge. I'm glad you explained the structure of the book, and often once you in the early phases of writing a book, you make a decision which begins to seem inevitable. And I think that the bridge as a through line for the stories is just, it gives such a great continuity, and there's so many different kinds of episodes that you found from life that happen on the bridge. And so I'm curious, when you decided that would be a great way to kind of guide you through this telling of your life story, did you find that your memory was flooded with incidents from that? I mean, did they just start kind of...
They came easily, and I think I've said this a lot too, but I think all of us could do it. I've suggested to my partner, Ralph, that he write a memoir about his cars, Every car he's ever had has a story to it. The first car his father had, there's a story to that. For the rest of us, Sylvia, I want her to go through her jewelry box. It's in her book anyhow. The story of a ring that she finds, or you look at your clothes, or things that you've worn over the years that are just minor things. So I didn't really think about using the bridge as the hook to hang my life on. But I have a friend who read, I don't know, one or two of the earlier pieces I wrote and said, why don't you just continue doing this, with the bridge? So it worked. That's all I can say. It's very artificial. It works. There are many things that happened to me that can't be in here because they didn't happen on the bridge. And it's a memoir, so I wanted to be as honest as I could. So anything that happened in the East Bay, I'm sorry.
I did notice that as a resident of Berkeley. Just Bay Bridge and the Richmond Bridge don't make it in there. But what's great about it is that it that captures the different emotional tones in the book, because sometimes the bridge is from Marin to San Francisco for something glamorous, a book launch or the theater, or a romantic date by the bay. Sometimes it's a trip to the hospital to visit somebody who's ill or dying, or your own experience in the hospital. Sometimes it's kind of escaping something unhappy at home. Then sometimes it's southbound, sometimes it's northbound, in all the different weathers. So it really brings to life the bridge in a wonderful way, and is a great, gives you a lot of space to explore different kinds of family moments as well. There are at least 3 or 4 different significant family incidents that happen either at the toll booth, an accident, an argument.
I miss having people at the toll booth, but yes. I live in Marin, and it's so hot over there. It's just so hot, and my front yard is just crisp, and getting in the bridge, and suddenly, man, you are fog. I explained it as being in dry ice. There's this beautiful, beautiful haze over everything. The temperature drops 20 degrees. Oh, it's heaven. I can remember when I lived in the city, I would drive to Marin because I wanted to get the children some sunlight. I wanted their vitamin D. Now I drive here to get away from the sun. So it's just
or the smoke. I mean, you described one time when you're coming to the city to escape the smoke of North Bay fires.
Yeah.
Another similarity between us with these books is that, again, we've primarily both written fiction, and now these are both memoirs that in different forms. And so I think it sounds as though you've drawn quite a lot on people in your life and things that have happened to you in your fiction. But how is it different to write a memoir and to be really trying to draw up the events as well as you could remember them? And what did you see as, were there things that were liberating about that? Were there things that were more restricting about it, or both?
It's a big question. I again enjoyed Sylvia's book, which is written partly memoir and partly fiction. It's quite a hybrid. The wonderful thing about writing memoir, they're all there. Everybody's there. You don't have to make anyone up. It's just great. You can slap them around. You can, butter them up. You can do stuff with them, but their people are there, and you don't have to make up their names. I mean, you get into trouble, of course, but you don't have to make up their names or change their hair color. You don't have to make up what happened to you. It happened to you. And what a relief not to use your imagination. And also what trouble you can get into, just reporting what you experienced, the way you saw it, that nobody else saw it the same way. Nobody else is going to remember it the same way. And that's why it's important that you write it, because it's your story and nobody else's. And we all know, if you have siblings, that each sibling in your family had a different parent. That's everybody sees their parents differently, or their life differently. So, so as far as the restrictions of it, is that what you asked? What are the advantages? The advantages are your freedom to just tell the truth. The restrictions are the same. Tell the truth, you're going to be in trouble. So, a lot of family secrets. And I don't have any family secrets here because this truly is about me. I'm not interested in my family's secrets. They can tell their own.
Mhm.
But my secrets are definitely here. That's fine. But it's, you feel very vulnerable. That's all. You feel vulnerable. Hell, you are. Okay, you're vulnerable. You're sitting duck. I always said if I ever had a Indian, spirit god, it would be, spirit animal, it would be sitting duck.
It's I think writing is always a exposure to some degree, but it's true that in memoir there's a certain sort of unvarnished, unclothed aspect that is more alarming. I don't know if there were episodes that ended up on the cutting room floor, or places that you held back. I mean, it feels very brave and very bold, and that you do tell what you want to tell. I mean, I don't feel any moment where you're holding back, but I was curious if there were.
No, but there were. I mean, when my first novel came out, there was that one scene with Holly Smith. I'd like to read that. Would that be possible? If I can find it. Maybe I can't find it. When my first novel came out, it was called Iron Shoes. It came out in 2001, actually, but this happened in 2002, and I'm on the Greyhound. I have to explain to some of my younger friends that the Greyhound is not a dog. We had the bus that went over the bridge all the time. And my novel was about my parents. And so I'm on the airporter going to my teaching job in Fayetteville from Marin. And this is 2002. Holly Smith weaves down the aisle of the airporter straight toward me. Holly is a tall, silver-haired, Harvard-educated dean of medicine at UCSF. I had pretended not to see him when I boarded. I had made a big show of struggling with my carry-on, and I had prayed he would not see me, at least until we arrived at SFO and I could make a dash for the gate. No luck. Holly balances down the aisle of the bus like the star athlete he once was, swift, graceful, unstoppable. One large hand lands on my shoulder, the other dangles dangerously near my tightly clasped laptop. It will be all right, I tell myself. I didn't do anything wrong. I read your novel, Holly says. Silence. Iron Shoes came out 2 years ago. Zesty prose, one reviewer said, sparkling and witty. But I know Holly does not want to talk about my zesty prose. He wants to talk about my characters. The daughter, who is based on me, only nicer. And the parents, who are based on my parents, only meaner. And the plot, which is roughly about divorce, depression, and death with a soupçon of alcoholism, addiction, and possible incest thrown in for good measure. You weren't writing about Jack and Dory, were you? Holly asks. Mom and Dad? I parrot brightly. No. Holly waits. I clear my throat and look out the window. The bus descends the grade and heads into the tunnel leading to the Golden Gate Bridge. Inside the tunnel, traffic slows and then, to my horror, stalls. Above us, the tunnel darkens. Were you? Holly repeats. No, I croak again. I hope not, Holly says, because at UCSF, Holly is fondly and unironically known as Dr. God. He and his wife, Margaret, had lived next door to my parents for years. They were close friends. Holly thought my dad was a sweet man. That was the phrase he used at the funeral. And he thought my mother was a little darling. He could not imagine a more attractive, spirited, glamorous couple. So much fun to be with. Because, Holly said, I loved them. And they loved him. Dad, sarcastic about everyone else, was awed by Holly's accomplishments, his brilliance, humility, and humor. Mom loved Holly because he was handsome and kind, and he always checked up on her during her many operations. You made those parents up, Holly prompts now, right? Totally, I babble, sounding like one of my students. Everyone in the book is totally made up, because they sure didn't sound like the Jack and Doris I knew. Of course not at all. I mean, I almost say, how could they? The parents in my novel were cruel to their children, two-faced to their friends, casually hateful to each other. They were the parents I knew, but they were not the parents Holly knew or needed to know. It's fiction, I explain. Of course, I may have used parts of, here and there. They enjoyed their scotch, Holly concedes. But that scene with the morphine, fiction! And the dog, was there a dog in the book? I can't remember. Is he tricking me? Holly doesn't trick people. I take a chance, shake my head vigorously, and insist again, fiction. Holly's eyes are luminous in the tunnel's dusk. I honestly can't tell if he believes me or not. He may not be used to lies. His own children, grown now into admirable adults, all 6 working for the benefit of humanity in the fields of poverty law, science, and education, have never, to my knowledge, lied. Well, he says, straightening to his full height, I miss them, your folks. I miss them too, I admit. Then perhaps you'll write another book soon. Yeah, good, yes, I mean to. The bus groans, lurches, and starts up again. Holly removes his hand from my shoulder and walks back to his seat. We move slowly forward. The cold winter light falls on my hot cheeks through the window as we exit the tunnel, accelerate, and rumble into the span. I lean back, exhausted. I remember the accounts I've read of near-death experiences, souls plummeting through tunnels just like this one, only to emerge into light in the welcoming arms of their loved ones. I imagine Mom greeting me with her heavy silver hairbrush raised, ready to strike, and Dad turned aside, thoughtfully fingering a putting iron. Welcome to the afterlife, kid. I smile, sour. I deserve their wrath. I know I betrayed them. But tough, I'm a writer. That's what writers do. I had to tell the truth, didn't I? If I was unkind to my parents, well, they were unkind to me. If I was unfair, so be it. I told my life story the same way they used to tell their life stories, and for the same reasons. For shock effect, for attention, and for laughs. And face it, Mom's favorite phrase, for pity. You made me what I am, I mouth to the empty air. And I add, finally giving Holly what he'd wanted all along. I am really, really sorry.
That's a great section to have chosen to read, and it captures many things, including, well again, how the sort of ambivalence in loving one's family, being the many currents of ambivalence in that familial love, and also a certain degree of kind of heartlessness one has to have as a writer to tell the truth. I found myself thinking about Anne Lamott quotation that if people didn't want you to write about them, they should have behaved better. Which is a great line and sometimes a comfort in writing a memoir. On this question of ambivalence, the book conveys very well that you have these very real, deep connections with your family, your children, your parents, in spite of what you were just reading as well. But I wanted to talk about motherhood specifically because you've been reading and writing over years, and I'm intrigued by my experience is that there's a little more willingness among readers to accept and explore the kind of darker, less euphoric aspects of motherhood than there used to be. I think there's sort of more openness to writing about that, and I think there was a line early on in this when you're just a young mother. And it just captures the feeling, I think, of a new parent, the sort of sudden alienation. You're supposed to be feeling all this joy, and you do, but you also have these other currents of feeling through you. And there's a line when you're in Sacramento, I think, with your young family. I long to be part of the world, but the world feels apart from me. And I think that captures that isolation well. Do you feel that there's a bit more sort of a openness to thinking of motherhood as not only a saintly state?
I hope so. I think my mother was certainly sort of trapped. I don't know. There's a lot more about daughters hating their mothers. Isn't there a new book called "I'm Glad My Mother's Dead" or something? Right. And I think therapists are more or less encouraging children to cut their parents off. There seems to be a lot more distancing in families now. I hear it all the time, that I don't think there was before. I mean, your family couldn't have been more dysfunctional, and you guys were all together. Nobody ever said I'm not talking to you anymore.
Yeah, no, that's true.
So I don't know, but I think motherhood probably is more fun now than it used to be because women have more fun. they're not just trapped at home. They not only get to be a mother, they get to be a wage earner and this and that. And I mean, maybe feminism has gone too far for women because now they can do everything and hopefully be president. So,
that's right. There are some genuinely very painful moments in the book, and so slightly back to the question of incidents you would write about or not write about. I don't know if you've written about this before, but in an early part of the story, when you're bullied and sort of harassed by some schoolboys that you know. I mean, one of them you have a kind of little like a kid crush on, and they basically mow you down with their bicycles, and so you're actually pretty badly injured and have to stay there for a while until your father comes to pick you up, which he does somewhat, not exactly reluctantly, but not particularly graciously. We're in county, I guess Mill Valley.
No, Sausalito.
Sausalito. And after a cocktail, it seems, then your dad has to take you to the hospital in San Francisco. And I hope it's not a spoiler to mention this, but there's just a very shocking, horrible moment after you've been treated and the cast has been put on and everybody has left you alone in this ward bed, that an unknown man comes and sexually assaults you at age 9 or so. No, I would think not. And I'm just curious if you've ever told that story before, and how and whether what it felt like to put that into this book, or if you haven't told it before, or
no, I'd never told it before, but I did. There was a lot of betrayals in that. In that one day, it's funny, we've all had like one really good day, and I had a really bad day. I was 8, and I'm glad I got it behind me. It was terrible. So yeah,
it's a horrifying story, and what's interesting is that in a novel, if you had that incident, it would sort of be a kind of narrative requirement to have other elements, other story elements or character elements that would come off of that horrifying assault. But you're choosing which memories to include in your life story. So it's this kind of sudden, brutal, very true to life, obviously in all ways, kind of episode of violence. And I was thinking, and it doesn't reverberate in any obvious way elsewhere in the book, but then I actually remembered that in the period when you were working for psychiatrists and an assistant to different psychiatrists who don't come off very well, I have to say, in the book either, there's a kind of striking quote from, I assume you're probably in your 20s or so at this point, maybe a little bit older. You're talking about one of these psychiatrists who's trying to get you to kind of cheat on the Medi-Cal form so that he can get paid for sessions with one of his patients who's in fact died already by committing suicide.
By jumping off the bridge.
By jumping off the bridge.
Oh my God.
And you would like to refuse to do this, but anyway. But there's a sentence, the most rebellious thing I've done in the 4 years I've worked here is change the word seductive to vulnerable in a court report Dr. T dictated to me describing a 5-year-old rape victim.
Yeah. I worked for 7 psychiatrists for 7 years, and I've been trying to write about that. I never could write about it. It seems a little dated now, but they were, heavily into medication. And it was heartbreaking. So this is the only time I've written about it, was this one incident working for them. They were in Ross. So they were only treating, wealthy couples who he didn't cuddle enough, or the cleaning lady didn't come. But then there were also a lot of really damaged. That was just when LSD was doing its worst, and drugs it was during the 70s, and there was terrible damage that they were not treating. That just drove me crazy.
Ending on a lighter note, before we take audience questions, I just want to say I do find the book to be also a kind of love letter to California, especially Northern California. There are different geographies that emerge: Sacramento, Mill Valley, Sausalito, San Francisco, the Bay. And I at some point, you had a period of your life when you were teaching in Arkansas, And there's some wonderful descriptions of Arkansas also, and the cultural differences there. You mentioned that when you were teaching in Arkansas, you taught a class on writers of the West or writing of the West. I feel very much that you're a Western writer. I wonder if you think of yourself that way. Do you feel yourself part of that tradition of Western writing?
Well, you got published with Counterpoint, which has published some of my favorite Western writers, so Gina Barriol. Yes, I do. I love the writers here. We always grab onto Jack Kerouac. Actually, he didn't belong to us, but I love Kerouac. Just fabulous writers. So,
Yeah.
Lucia Berlin.
Yes, yeah. She was on the. I was glad that she made that list in the New York Times.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I felt that there are other geographies that come into your story, travels in Greece or Hawaii or Mexico or Portugal, but there's perhaps because of the bridge, there's always a coming back home.
We're lucky. We live in a bubble, but we're lucky.
There definitely are many other subjects, but I'm also curious to hear. See, I could keep asking Molly questions, or we could have some questions from the audience. Do people have questions?
Yeah. I was wondering, in your writerly decision-making process, when you start a short story or start a novel, what was the impetus to start a memoir?
What started this memoir?
Yeah.
It was a piece I wrote quite a while ago. I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, about my mother and grandmother fighting over the 25 cents for the toll gate. And I just wrote that for fun because I remembered how the car lurched back and forth. I think it was a Studebaker. I was in the back seat of the car, and I read it. There used to be wonderful reading series. I think, Michael, that's where I met you in Sausalito, called There was Pints and Prose, which was at a wonderful bar in Fairfax, but there was another little one at Why There Are Words, which actually. I wish Peg was here because Why There Are Words Press is really a one-woman operation, and I am so impressed with Peg Purcell. But she started this reading series, and I read it out loud, and I got, people loved it. Sorry to be such a, easily flattered person, but they loved it. So I thought, oh, that was fun and easy, so I'll just do another one. And so, sorry, it was just, not very smart, but that's what I did. So, and it evolved. So, if something's fun to do, I think as writers, we think, oh, that was fun and easy. Then we think, oh, I shouldn't do it. But that's exactly what we should go for.
Well, because in fact it translates into the reading experience. There's a fluidity and a kind of comfort. There's a great. We were talking about this before we started tonight. That one of Molly's novels that she's writing during the course of quite a few years keeps making an appearance as a kind of character that she's wrestling with. And I think probably any writer in the audience has had that experience of the book that you struggle with and put down, pick up, and somebody gives you edits, and then and on it goes.
And it's for sale here.
Oh, and it's for sale here.
And it's I've got a screenwriter who's doing a film treatment of it. She hasn't sold it yet. She's writing it. So.
But this sounds like this was a less of a struggle in a sense, or less of a wrestling match. Maybe.
Oh gosh, no! I mean that novel. Oh, this was much easier. Yeah, the novel took me 20 years, and it's something that should have been finished in 5 weeks. Truly, it's just it's supposed to be a comic novel. Mm-hmm. I got the idea for it, no problem. 2021 or no, I mean 22, something like that. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No problem. I was going to go home and write it. No problem. 22 years later. So, and those of you who are working on novels, take heart.
Yes, hi.
So Molly, after you finished your first draft, did you have any regrets?
About this? No. No. I mean, you always have regrets, but no, I really didn't. I don't regret anything I've ever written. I can't tell you how many dinner parties I've regretted. How many relationships, but no, never anything I've written,
That's great. I was thinking about the way that your writing life also has ambivalences in it, in the sense that there are moments where you feel disappointed, or as we all have, right? Disappointments and then successes, and then maybe dwelling more on the disappointments in this. It's sometimes hard to enjoy the moment when actually inside the moment when people are responding to your work. But there's almost a parallel in some of the love stories that are throughout the course of your life as well. Yeah,
Lots of regrets.
Any other?
Do you have any advice for writers who don't share your affinity for editing? It's really hard for me. Do you have any advice?
It's hard to see what we've done. So I do have a writers group that I'm in, and I really believe in showing your work to other writers, not to your family, not to people you care about, certainly never to your boyfriend or husband. And because people will pick up on things right away that you didn't see, and it just helps you so much. So the best writing group I was ever in was one that had a sort of almost a line editor, a woman who was she knew, and it had a guy in it that knew guns, and knew cars, and could help you with details like that. It had one woman who hated everything I did. How seriously am I supposed to take this, Molly? Another woman who loved everything, no criticism at all, it was just great. And then, you get all this odd assortment of feedback together. If you have a writing group of, say, 6 or 7, and everybody writes back what they're thinking, and you try and make sense of it, but you'll get things that will resonate with you. That's all. The only editing you need is anything that resonates with you. Nobody's saying, oh, this isn't a memoir, this is a cowboy, don't do it. Just listen to yourself. And also, putting something down and looking at it the next day, you're a good editor. You go, what? I have no idea what that means.
It's interesting because at one point you've done a lot of teaching, as you mentioned, and as is clear from this way you talk about writing. And at one point you sort of say in passing, I don't really think writing can be taught, but you do feel it can be learned, and I really, that made sense to me, partly because of what you were just talking about, that I think one thing that people can learn to do is develop their own inner ear, their own, sensibility to know the criticism that will be helpful, and not to take on, they're like, well, somebody thinks I should write this as a sci-fi novel, so maybe I should do that,
I know, it's very confusing.
Right.
Very confusing for beginning writers, yeah.
Right.
I guess certainly a repeated theme in the book is your pursuit of love, and you just sort of mentioned, relations with a lot of regrets. But like when you're writing each of the sort of the years, do you really try to put yourself in the mindset of that year and write kind of from that perspective, as opposed to like it being kind of changing with the knowledge of what's to come in the future?
That's a good question. What I used as a resource here were my journals. So I wanted to be true to who I was at that time. Because I don't think I could look back and say, oh, it was like, I'd probably want to gloss it over a little, but those journals are just, they're like puke bags. They're full of self-pity and anger and jealousy, horrible, ugly stuff. It's just a little bag of ugly demons. But if I could go back, I could think, oh, that's what I was really feeling about so-and-so at that time. And so that way I could be as close to who I was then, because if I wrote about it now, I would be so self-protective and I'd be so knowing, I'd be so smart. I got out of it, right? And hopefully they did too. But at the time, I was very into it. And so that's what I tried to capture here. That's why each one goes by year. But I think that's a great question.
Journaled extensively throughout your whole life?
Yeah, and my daughters have they're just jostling each other to volunteer to burn them when I get it. and they're welcome to, but I've been keeping a journal since I was 9. And most of it is all about how much I weigh, what I need to do to be a better person, who hates me, who doesn't. But a lot about relationships, So I had to go back into it. It wasn't fun either. It wasn't fun rereading those journals. I did not like the person that I was. And at the time when I couldn't see a way out, and now I go and say, oh, well, you did get out of it, but not well, so not well.
I just wanted to compliment your title. I mean, it's like
Yes,
it was
it
made
is a
for
great-
you.
It is a great title.
It sort of came at the very end. I didn't know what I was going to call it.
Yeah, it's perfect.
I think it's perfect. I love the cover.
It's a great cover, and we happen to be the colors of the
Oh my gosh!
Sorry.
That's crazy.
Now, getting the right title is hard. Often I'll get it. I mean, like with this novel that I struggled with for 20 years, I had the title in 2002, The Home for Unwed Husbands. Great title. But what on earth was the book? So that was the problem.
Great. Oh, we have time for one more question. Anybody else? Question?
No, you again.
Yeah.
I guess you didn't like the person you were. Do you like the person you are now? And is there like an evolution in that? Like, do you feel like
You find a writer who likes himself. And you found Philip Roth.
That's great. That's great.
No, one thing about getting older, you know, I used to go, who am I? Who am I? Now I don't care. I just go, who are they? And you don't think about yourself so much anymore. So I don't think whether I like myself or not. It just doesn't matter. Okay, I'm stuck. That's it.
I mean, that sort of leads to, there is a kind of feeling of acceptance towards the end of the book, which kind of captures that feeling, not quite as bleakly as you just suggested. But it's really interesting to me to hear that it was reading your journals that helped you capture those feelings, because there's some very bracing, sort of, you know, salty passages that feel so true, so there's a lot that's very funny as well. So, well, thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. This was great. Thank you all very much.
Give Molly and Sylvia one more hand. And thank you all for coming. If you'd like to purchase the book, if you haven't already, we have some at the front register, so all the way to the front of the store. And we also have Sylvia's book as well. And then Molly will be doing a signing right at the back desk where my colleague Carr is standing right now. So thanks again, and stick around.
Thanks.